Story 1. To make a long story sort of short, when I was in 8th grade I started to date a guy named Danny who was a junior in high school. He was completely possessive, obsessive to new levels I hadn't seen before. I threatened to file a restraining order many times but always fell right back into his gaslighting mind games. After a while of dating someone who was emotionally abusive, demeaning and damaging, I decided to end the relationship. I had a new love interest named Steven. He was also a junior. Danny was stalking me our whole relationship. Anytime I went out with a friend he would be somewhere watching me and texting me at the same time. "I see you're wearing a skirt, trying to get fucked, you slut," is just one of the examples of the things he would say to me. He would call over and over again, leaving strange voicemails on my phone and my house phone. It was summer of 2006. My mom was genuinely concerned because of the voicemails and seeing him outside my house all the time. One night my best friend at the time, Kelly, and I were all drinking beers behind the mall parking lot as we often did. It was me, my friend Kelly, and 3 of Steven's friends. Kelly had a huge crush on one of Steven's friends, Sean. It was our routine for the summer to hang with this crew, and I really liked Steven. We were all pretty close and would always buy a 30-pack of Coors Light, or a cube as we called it, and drank behind the mall. It was a great night and Steven and I were making out, laughing and having fun. Danny was texting me the whole night from different numbers. I showed Steven and friends, and they were laughing, calling him weird and telling me not to worry about him. They assured me they had my back. Every single night one of the guys would make sure I got home safely, because it got to the point Danny was calling all of their phones as well, making threats, etc. They weren't afraid of him at all and threatened to jump him if he came around. This last night was the final straw. We were all pretty drunk, so my guard was down. We were listening to music and Danny kept calling me. I blocked his number, and he just kept calling and messaging me from different numbers. My mom called me and asked me if everything was alright, because Danny called the house phone 100 times, and he's leaving weird voicemails begging for me to answer. He was making strange bribes, also said he wanted to sit down at Wendy's with me and see me one last time. "I think you should come home soon," my mom said nervously. I told my friends, and I was getting worried, and I was honestly scared Danny was going to show up, and I had no idea what he was going to do. I could sense something bad was going to happen. He was absolutely unhinged at this point. He was sickly obsessed with me, especially fixated on my past partners, and one of the most controlling people I've ever met. His abuse was horrible. He knew I was with Steven and friends, and that infuriated him. He would write messages putting me down and calling me a slut for being with Steve. Then would text me how much he loved me and that we can't break up. He would threaten to hurt me and especially Steven. As we finished our beers for the night, everyone went their separate ways to walk home. Steve and I were walking home together because we lived over that catwalk and a few blocks away from one another. I actually wanted to walk Steve home first because I didn't want Danny to hurt him like he kept threatening he was going to do. I had enough of this fucking guy, and his stalking was beyond unsettling. Steve and I drunkenly walked down the block talking and laughing. As we're walking we see a hooded guy walking towards us fastly. I knew it was him right away. My heart started pounding, and I knew that walk. It was fucking Danny. He came up and tried to punch Steve and Steve ducked, and I put myself in front on top of S to block Danny's punches. They were saying shit to each other back and forth, and I literally snapped. Danny was calling me names and telling me to come with him. I threw my purse on the ground and lunged at Danny like a drunken wrestler. I threw him to the ground and screamed in his face, "It's over. Do you get it, you fucking idiot? Don't you dare touch him or me. I've had enough." Tears were rolling down my face out of anger. I pleaded and begged him to leave me alone and let me be free of him. I got up, grabbed my bag, and Steve and I continued to walk. Danny was walking beside us at this point. He was walking with us, crying and blurting out weird things. Like weird rants about our relationship. His walk and stare was so fucking unsettling. He was walking at our pace, and every time we walked faster he would also walk faster. We were walking on the sidewalk and Danny was walking on the street. He then asked Steve, "Are you going to fuck her on her period? Did you even know she has her period right now? She has it for at least 4 more days. She gets it every month around the 5th until about the 11th," he said, leaning and smiling to see what Steve would do. He was also calling me a slut and demanding me to look at him, which is why I kept my head down. I kept telling Steve and myself to disengage from Danny. Steve ignores him, but throws out a few insults. Steve tells Danny he's acting like a psycho and to fuck off. I held Steve's hand and continue looking down as I walked. The fact he was telling Steve my menstrual cycle, asking questions with a maniacal smile, made me sick. He had a dark tone and sounded like a hyperactive serial killer. After Steve and I stopped answering him, Danny laughed and he speed ran back into his car and drove away. We got ourselves together, and Steve was saying that he thinks he will confront us again before we get to our houses. We continued walking on the dark roads and over the catwalk, which is creepy in itself. We were both hyper-vigilant. Every car I heard or saw headlights I would gasp and hide. As we got to Steve's house, he gave me a kiss goodnight, and I headed for the 6-min walk ahead. The wind was howling, and it was dark. I heard some noises coming from the bush next to me. I figured it was just a skunk or an animal, or at least I was hoping that it was, and I'm irrationally afraid of skunks. Just a side note. The wind was also howling, so I thought maybe it was the wind. I hurried past the bushes. As I was walking, I heard someone singing in a demonic voice the lyrics to the song "Make Damn Sure" by Taking Back Sunday. It was the part, "I'm gonna make damn sure that you can't ever leave. No, you won't ever get too far from me. You won't ever get too far." He was repeating it hunched in the bushes. I started to run and scream. He grabbed me from behind, and I remember the chills I had when I felt him grab me. He was waiting by Steven's house as we were walking home. He must have drove over there. Fucking creep. He knew which route we were taking and how long it would take us to get to his hiding place. Danny started saying, "I watched you kiss Steve," and walk him to his door. He was saying it in my ear. I became enraged and started hitting him with my bag, punching and screaming. "I want you to leave me alone. Please, Danny, I'm begging you. I'm going to file a restraining order on you." As I screamed, my eyes were filled with tears again from fear and the trauma I endured with this guy. I managed to get his fucking hands off of me and ran like hell to my house. I heard him yelling stuff at me, but I just kept running off pure adrenaline. I turned around when I got to my house and was just relieved he wasn't behind me. I hate hearing that song to this day and hate the disrespect I dealt with because of this asshole. He drove outside my house that night a few times. He continued to call and leave messages for a couple more weeks, but I never answered and moved on with my life. Haven't seen him since that night and never want to again. Glad to not be living in my hometown. Please protect yourself and remember, you don't have to be abused, and you are worth more than a partner who is toxic and manipulative, controlling. Stay safe, ladies, and stay away from the Dannys of the world. I left out details of Danny's abuse towards me because I just don't feel comfortable sharing some of the things he's done and put me through.